Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 25 of Season 7, and tonight we discuss the script of Episode 10. We are officially beginning the battle. This is the episode which is the real transition into the Near Ninth itself. We get the first opening military moves in the attack on Dorthonion and the dragon. But also, very significantly, we get all of the pre-battlefield farewells and departures from everybody around Beleriand who's headed up towards the north. So we're really setting the stage for starting off the battle proper in episode 11. So, before we start, quick announcements. We are in the spring Moot season now, and we are coming up soon, in just 2 weeks, on Sunshine Moot down in Orlando, Florida. That is our next Moot. That's going to be a fun one. We're going to be doing a sort of SilmFilm-esque exercise. We're going to be talking through and planning out another adaptation. This will be the Muppet Lord of the Rings adaptation that we're going to be planning out on February 22nd at Sunshine Moot in Orlando. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then looking forward to Carlsbad, California, SoCal Moot, and then Tex Moot after that. So lots of fun moots coming up. And we're getting ready for Myth Moot too. We should be releasing tickets should go on sale relatively soon. Call for papers is up and will be open through the end of March. So we are getting ready for June 19th through 22nd in Leesburg, Virginia. All right. Let us get into, we're all over the map here today. In fact, although we didn't actually go there, we were even it was even discussion of Brithumbar, right, all the way out to the Havens here in this one. So we were this is, I think, the most geographically far-flung episode we've had all season long, which was kind of interesting. All right, so you can find the script document in the forums, in the Season 7 script forum. Nick was the primary author of this one. And I know Nick was writing it under a certain degree of hardship. Nick, I know you've been ill lately, so.
A few times, yeah. But
yeah.
and it's not so much me being sick, because like as long as I'm conscious, I can kind of do things.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, my wife is now nearing 3 months pregnant. So this, me being sick and her being sick and the kids being like, this is not, these things do not mesh well.
Yes.
They do not give me a lot of free time.
Exactly. So. It does rather limit
yes.
Script writing time for sure.
Yeah.
And Maria, you had wanted me to mention about voting for casting, right?
Yes, because that will be our next session, will be on casting. So everyone needs to cast their vote for the nominees so we can have something to discuss next time.
That's right. We'll be looking at the votes.
Yeah, there's 18 roles that need to be cast for this season. 2 elves, 2 dwarves, a wizard, and a bunch of humans.
They're not in 6 fir trees, are they?
No.
I mean,
no. We could put them there, I suppose.
I was about to say.
Be part of the audition process.
There's a lot of fir trees in Dorthonion.
Right. Could you climb up?
Did you put any dwarves in? Did you put any dwarves in fir trees?
Yes.
No.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. Love that you defaulted to the Rankin Bass version there, Nick. Yeah, I mean,
it's the correct version.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Really, again, almost all of the music in the Rankin Bass is just awesome.
There's that classic one though, the Greatest Adventure, which I know is
the
your favorite.
The warbly one.
Yes, the exception. Yes,
exceptional. Yes, exactly.
Exceptional. I think I can agree with that from a certain point of view.
There we go.
It's definitely exceptional. Exceptional in several different senses, but and none flattering. So let's talk about episode 10. So, the attack on Dorthonion. First of all, I was really, when we talked about this before, like I remember hearing you explaining to me the plan for this, and we were discussing this, and I generally sort of got it, but there were a lot of, this felt much clearer and much cleaner than the previous version. I really like how this came across. The biggest cost, I think, the biggest cost of the choice to have the fight between Azakal and Glaurung and Azakal's death here is that we lose the dwarf dirge in the middle of like the main battle.
Right.
That's
yes.
That sort of image, right? Both the visual and audio image of the dwarves processing out, singing, bearing the body of Azakal, and like the battle parting around them as they go is pretty awesome. But basically, I mean, I still think there was no way to avoid the dragon problem, and that we needed to find a way to solve the dragon problem and the Dorthonian problem. I mean, those are things that Tolkien doesn't really address at all in the Near Ninth. And I think that those were,
To be fair, Tolkien didn't put a dragon in Dorthonion.
Well, no, he didn't put a dragon in Dorthonion.
So
no.
that's why he didn't solve that problem.
No, not that problem specifically, but
that's definitely an us problem. He does talk about it, but I think he kind of
he has them retake Dorthonion prior to the Near Ninth, and that's supposed to be the thing that tips off Morgoth that they're ready to do something because they're on the move and doing that. So it is the first step of the war in his version as well. It just, he doesn't tell us anything about that. Just says, oh, they retook Dorthonion. So we have to kind of imagine what that would have been like.
And the idea of sort of isolating the Glaurung confrontation here outside, just rather than having 18 things happening at once on the battlefield, and one of them being Glaurung charging and fighting against Azakal. Like, there are a lot of ways in which this happens all over the place in the Silmarillion, right? Where the narrative style of how, like, the narrative approach that Tolkien has taken to the storytelling is extremely anecdotal, right? We're getting just like, the battle happened. Let me give you just a couple highlights in no particular chronological order, right? Like, with no sense of like really the flow of the battle. Like, this thing happened and this thing happened and this thing happened. And so if we were to try to adhere to that more closely, I think it would get buried. It would get lost, or it would take over and we'd lose everything else in the middle of the battle. So as I say, I liked the effect of isolating it.
One of the things that I really liked that came out of this was the opportunity to give Glaurung more personality.
Yes.
In this way, if the way that it's done in the book would not have lent itself towards giving him dialogue at any point.
So just charging dragons, things on fire,
right? Like it was in the Bragalok, which again, now we're just doing the same thing again.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Which we kind of avoid by doing it this way.
Yeah, we would not have had the time for dialogue with like that. I mean, I love there were so I I mentioned at the beginning what seemed to me the biggest cost of making this change.
Yes.
But there are definitely things that we gained by
Right.
making this change. And one of them is a Glaurung and Maedhros conversation with Smaug, right? Like the conversation with Glaurung. I mean, and I mean, I was catching the, like, you know, the catastrophe reference, and there were several fun things, you know, ways in which that, because of course this is, as always, one of the most fun things in SilmFilm is playing the long game, right? And so to have, when you have a chain of things, which is going, the end point of which is going to be Bilbo and Smaug, right?
Yeah, greatest and chiefest of calamities. Yes,
right,
yes.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
that's the final version of this
I nearly
story.
used the word calamity, but I felt like that was too far.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit too far. Catastrophe. After all, Glaurung is the father of dragons, and
Exactly.
the father of calamity is
It's
catastrophe.
Right, right.
Yeah. And what I liked about the conversation was that we've been dancing around what is the impact of the oath on Maedhros's decision, like, we have to go fight Angband right now. And we keep not quite saying what would happen if they don't do this plan.
Right.
But Glaurung has no reason to dance around it. He's like,
Glaurung
"Oh,
knows
yeah."
exactly what,
Yes.
what would happen.
It's like, oh, I know you need to take care of, I know why you're here, because you do want to fight Angband, don't you? And if not, wonder what you would fight instead of Angband.
Right.
So to have Glaurung immediately call him out like that was interesting, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, showing another effect of the comparative haste, right, of the sketchy instances of Glaurung that we get. I mean, prior to the Turin story, in the Silmarillion, we get the very brief story of young Glaurung running amok, right, and getting chased back by Fingon. We get a reference to the fact that Glaurung is in the forefront of the charge in the Bragalach, right, without much specific reference to his deeds then, other than that he was
There.
and unstoppable.
Part of the fire.
Yeah, exactly. And then the story with Azakal in the Nearknife, where again, we don't. So, in other words, when we actually get to spend time with Glaurung, finally, in the Turin story, we get to know his personality, we get to hear his conversation, we get to see his other power other than just being some kind of military machine, right? For instance, I love the fact that we got a little preview of the power of his voice.
Yeah.
Right, that was really important. And again, it would have been really awkward and difficult to be in the middle of a battlefield and be essentially asking everybody to be like, time out, we need to have a long back and forth with Glaurung here. Like, that would have been difficult to do well. So and
here we get to show him as being like hyper intelligent.
Yes.
Like he's able to suss out what's happening here. He gathers Maedhros' primary intention here.
Yes.
Right. He's able to track his entire strategical line of thinking. But he's also able to suss out the tactical situation that, oh, this isn't the fight that actually matters right here.
Yes. And even there was an element, in a sense, there was an element even of humility in Glaurung's response. That is, he was being challenged, right? He could see that a trap was being laid for him. He figured out very quickly that a trap was being laid for him. And instead of
instead of giving Maedhros the spanking he richly deserves for even attempting such a thing.
Exactly. Like, he could be like, how dare you do that? I'm now going to squash you like the bug you are. Right. He could have even been like, you're trying to trap me, you pathetic little worms. Like, I don't care. Let me show you how much I don't care about the traps that you're doing and how useless this entire idea was. But instead, he turns around and runs away. because he realizes there's a more important thing going on, and that it's not all about him personally, right? Which again, that's what I mean by the element of humility. Like he wasn't worried about like being challenged by Maedhros and losing face, or his like he did not he was not able to be goaded either like an animal or like a fool. So yeah, all of those things.
I don't know if I would classify that as humility though, because he doesn't. It's not like he sees Maedhros as a peer.
No, exactly.
Right, like it's not like a challenge from Maedhros has the merit to really challenge him.
But the idea
it's
of
certainly
it's not,
wisdom.
It's not all about me.
Yes,
is a level of wisdom.
Yes.
And
exactly.
Emotional intelligence that you would not necessarily expect from a dragon.
No, and really, Maedhros's plan is premised upon if I challenge him, he will charge, and then we can get him.
He probably would have gotten Smaug.
Right. He probably would have gotten Smaug. Yeah. Smaug is goaded, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sure.
By Bilbo, at least into the the fateful boast by Smaug. But yeah. No, anyway, so yeah, I was thinking of the potentially long line of conversations with dragons that could lie ahead of us. Obviously the Turin stuff with Glaurung that's going to be coming, and the Nienor stuff, of course, as well. And then there are going to be other opportunities with other dragons, even somebody like Scala the Worm, for instance, and Fram. But again, Bilbo's the ultimate end of that line. And so the idea that basically the front of the line is Maedhros and Glaurung seems right. Like that's, with the whole Tolkien pattern of diminishing, right? To, just as we will one day see Mary Brandybuck standing in the Hurin position, lopping off the hands of the orcs that are trying to take them prisoner, right? Being the miniature version, right, of Hurin's stand at the Fens of Sarek. So we will see Bilbo being the miniature Maedhros, right? Even with the sort of parallel where, he's standing there having his conversation with the dragon, and then the dragon goes off and fights somebody else instead and is killed and is damaged by him, right? Killed in that case.
But again, there's a reoccurring theme of that is played out in this season of the Feanorians having to watch other people pay for their like Maedhros knows that should have been him, not Oswald.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, it was fun. Yeah, again, just like in a much bigger scale and in a much more serious way. Bilbo saying, I shouldn't have said that about Barrel Rider, right? Afterwards.
Oops. Right.
Yes. It's difficult to keep your head when talking to a dragon. Anyway, so as I say, there were and also, by the way, one of the other things that I was definitely feeling that I really, really loved, another gain, a significant gain I felt from the scene was Glaurung coming in from the side, right? So once again, showing his awareness, his own cunning.
That was your idea.
Actually, brilliant, right? I said, I love it. I still love it.
We even have an illustration.
Right.
If you keep hitting PowerPoint slides, you'll eventually get to.
Okay. There. Oh, look at that. There we go.
This is my D&D overland map skills. Coming into use here.
Perfect. Yeah. And what I loved about this, one of the big gains that I felt that I don't think I was anticipating, though sometimes I surprise myself and forget what I was thinking about months ago. But when we last had this conversation, but when he's coming down especially the way he comes down and sort of stops halfway and is talking with him and stuff. It is a great setup for Teglin later on, for the Turin story.
That is 100%.
Yeah.
Why he's coming
down the bank off the cliff. Yeah. And I really loved how that came about, especially since the way that his pivot plays into that, right? He had he continued down into the gully, would they have succeeded in killing him? I don't know if they would have succeeded in killing him, though. You got to think if all the ballista had gotten a clean shot at him, they might have taken him.
If nothing else, he flees from here back to Angband.
Right.
There's no way that he gets out of this box without significant pain.
Yes, exactly. Again, and what I like about that is that it creates a kind of dramatic irony. It prepares dramatic irony for the Turin situation, right? Turin's desperate gambit to come up underneath Glaurung and stab him from below. And yet, we have now the opportunity to have a physical parallel with Glaurung, right?
Right.
Where he's going to come down and the viewer will, a perceptive viewer will notice it and be like, is he going to stop and turn around again? Like he did before, except this time he goes on. And so the viewer is going to be, the dramatic irony will be the viewer will be like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen. It's going to work. But Turin doesn't know. Right.
Yeah. So a tension that is created by having already seen this play out, that Turin's unaware of these details.
Yeah. So that was, again, I think another thing gained. So the effect on balance, I'm still really happy with the overall decision. I mean, just as there are no perfect solutions when you're, translating something from one language to another, there's no perfect decisions in doing adaptation either.
There's always trade-offs.
But in the end,
part of what's so awesome about the dirge as the dwarves leave the battlefield is the clear image of how important the death of the king is to the dwarves. And so if we're going to lose the level of drama of that action, then we had to make sure we incorporated that element into the rest of the story. So hopefully by seeing Azaghal take the actions he does and seeing the dwarves reacting to this outside of just the dirge, but the after effect, hopefully we're still telling that part of the story effectively.
Right.
That's the goal anyway.
Yeah. And again, it's not going to be quite as cool as it would be to see them marching off the battlefield.
No.
But we're also not. But we're also not dropping the coolness quotient of that moment to zero either. Right.
It still happens.
It still happens. Yeah.
Also, it's a little less, because the moment in the book feels almost unbelievable.
Yes.
There's hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the field, and they all just move out of the way for the dwarves to leave. None of them does anything.
Yes.
Which feels a lot more realistic in a situation where it's just orcs. There's not that many of them. They've kind of already been spanked a bit, and this is already a seriously weird and creepy thing the dwarves are doing.
No, I agree. It's one of those things.
It brings it down for sure, but I think in a way that feels
the almost unbelievable element of that is what makes it so cool in the book, right?
Yes.
It's there's an awe to it because he just asks us to imagine that. He doesn't explain it. He doesn't give any details because he doesn't have to, because it's not that kind of narrative. Like, it's the burden is not on him to explain, like, so what do the orcs do? What do they look like? Why do people, how does that work? What are the logistics of that?
This
like,
happens.
Can they even hear the
over
dwarves?
Several miles, like
right, exactly. Like in the so, but he doesn't have to explain it. All he has to do is just say that one sentence, you know, and then leave us to imagine it. And when we imagine it, we make it
it's amazing
in our, because it is amazing. Like, it's hard to believe. So this is, the more you think about that, more you think through that moment, the more you see, this is one of those things where you're really in a visual medium versus not only written medium, but that particular kind of, that scene wouldn't work nearly as well on the Battle of Pelennor Field either, even within Tolkien's writing. Again, if he had to describe all of those things, like, why do the orcs not attack the like, because they're singing? Like, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't work or couldn't work, but if he were in a more close to the ground narrative, he'd have to at least describe what that looked like.
Right. You'd have to offer a little more explanation, a little more description. And like you said, what makes it so cool is that it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Yeah.
So how do you make something unbelievable more believable?
Yeah.
And still preserve the awesome nature of it.
Yeah.
So I think that what we're doing here is on a much smaller scale, therefore possibly more believable, but also way less cool.
It is,
just by definition.
By definition,
like it's the same thing happening.
He still fights a giant dragon.
That was cool.
That part was cool.
That was cool.
And to your benefit, Nick, the description in the Silmarillion is basically like, Oswald stabbed the dragon, and if only his sword had been longer, dragon totally would have been dead. But like, that's all we get.
Right.
And so you gave a whole explanation and sequence of how this was happening and what led to the death of Oswald. So I feel like that made that part of the story not only more exciting, but also a lot more stakes. Like, the viewer would be a lot more invested in the actions Oswald's taking and how this is going to impact Glaurung and all that.
I wanted to set it up so that people who were familiar with the story would see it coming and be like, oh, here we go. And then it takes a couple of twists and turns, so you're not 100% sure where that's going. And so,
I loved the, do we have a map? Okay.
We for sure have.
We got all the maps. Okay, hang on. Let me do all.
They're in order. That's all I can tell you.
Let me do all.
They're not labeled really well.
Well, yeah, there's so many maps. I can almost make a stop action film of these maps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nick has the first one. The first one is for Nick. Yeah.
So let's look at the tactics all the way through, because that was interesting. But I did like that. Just back briefly to the. I loved the overall effect of the final fight with Glaurung and the dwarves. The combination of how tactically effective Azaghals attack force was.
Yeah.
Until suddenly Glaurung comes in like a bowling ball, right? And blasts through them, and there's nothing they can do about that. Though again, even then, he turns and breathes fire on them, and the dwarves are like, yeah, it doesn't actually bother us at all. Which is a really fun, and I would want to play that up, basically. Yeah, I think we'd want to play, like, if I were the director, I'd want to play that up a bit. Like, he bowls through them, and then he turns around and blasts them with fire, and it's like, oh, well, that's it for the dwarves, except the dwarves don't care; they're prepared, right? That's that would be a really fun moment. Okay, so let's walk through, because I'm pretty sure I followed things as we go through. Yeah, I will see if there were things I didn't understand. We start with the one behind you, right? That's the initial tactical movement.
So we start off with and we start off kind of in media res, right? With the attack on Maedhros, while intercutting with the speech that Maedhros gave earlier in the day, because I wanted to have some explanation for what's going on in dialogue, give Maedhros a chance to say some exciting stuff, without having to do the kind of, okay, we have the exciting speech, and then we have the battle, and then we go on to,
like the opening of Gladiator or something.
Right. And so in doing it this way, we're able to get both of those scenes simultaneously. We're able to see exactly what all of these guys can do, all of the things that they're good at. Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. I mean, this is meant to be a showcase to prepare for the battle that's coming.
This is meant to show what is supposed to happen at the
yes
at the near knife.
Right.
Yeah,
if the near knife weren't so sorrowful and full of tears.
Exactly.
This is how it would have played out.
Yeah. Yes. This is what the battle would have been had the tears in fact been countable. No, I liked that. I will admit, for the first 1 to 2 pages of the script, I was confused. The jumping between morning and afternoon was
sure.
I think on screen it would be much clearer.
Oh yeah.
Because the lighting would be totally different.
Yes, yeah. And there could be presumably some overlay of his speech with the action and things.
Yes.
So that
it would. That is.
But and especially since, of course, the way, following the traditional script mode, doing the exterior Dorthonion, the only difference was the one word, right? So I kept having to be wait, I'm looking for morning, afternoon, what's going on? So once I got adjusted to what was happening and stopped looking at the stage directions, okay, right. Speech in the morning, battle in the afternoon.
Yes.
Tracking. Got it. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
But I had a little problem there, but as I say, I think that would be easier.
I'm trying to remember, because I'm sure I stole at least the heart of Maedhros' speech from somewhere, and I can't. Usually, I'm able to remember where I did it, where it came from, so that I can credit it. But I don't think the problem
you have few speeches in this script,
right?
And all of them kind of sound like other speeches, in the sense that there's only so many things you say, right. Rally before the big game, or
right. Yes, for sure. But this one, because of the way it's structured, it's very. I really wanted to lean away from the speech of Aragorn at the Black Gate in the film, because it's so easy to slide into that mode.
Yep.
That is such a simple speech that's very, very effective.
Yes.
I mean, we know where they got that one from, right?
Yes.
But it's extraordinarily effective. It's iconic. Everybody remembers it. And so I wanted to avoid. But because of the way that the build has to feel that same way, his build in that scene, the way that Jackson structures that scene, that build is exactly the same as what I'm trying to accomplish here. Right. So that his speech is coming to an end just when boom, you're slamming right into stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So no, it was the lovely battle with everybody working together and doing their part and having the beautiful little success against the orcs at the beginning was great. One of the things that I was experiencing while reading that whole opening section actually was part of one of the other real payoffs to doing SilmFilm, which is just having so much richer of an understanding of the characters, right? Familiar things in a familiar plot position, but it just hitting so much harder.
Right.
And I was having that experience during the battle, right?
Okay.
In the sense that with the Feanorians in the middle and the, you know, Ulfang and the Easterlings coming in, and, you know, just from the battle lines, knowing what it meant to them, I was immediately like imagining a position from like Ulfang and Bor's perspective. They'd never seen orcs before, right? So this is the, you know, like their first encounter with the like mythical, crazy, evil creatures they've been told about but have never seen yet. And then there's the Fëanorians there in the middle, and there's you know, and you've got the Kelegorm's cavalry on the one side and Bor's chariots on the other side. And anyways, I loved it because every person involved, in every named person involved in the battle had a really rich history within our story, right? Within our world. It was
we know them.
Yeah, we know them. Exactly.
Right.
It reminded me in a kind of smaller scale way of the awesome payoff in Lotro in the Lord of the Rings Online. Like when they set the player characters in the Epic Quest line in Volume 3 to gathering up the Grey Company to depart from Rivendell and head down to, and you know every single ranger by name and have spent hours questing with each one of them, and you know their backstories and everything, where their locations on the map, and like this guy's relationships in Forachel, and this guy out in Annuminus and everywhere else, and
it's like getting the Avengers together.
Exactly. Instead of a group of people with only one named character who represents all of them in Halbered, right? Though he's there too, of course, in Lotro. Anyway, like the payoff that they get from the like 75 hours of gameplay that you did going around Eriador, meeting ranger after ranger.
Those guys, you fought alongside
exactly every single one of them. You fought alongside.
I mean, I haven't gotten anywhere near that far in that game.
And therefore, like, and it's the same thing. It's, and then on the even bigger scale, the battle of Pelennor Field. Like every captain, not just every person named in the song, but every captain on the field of Gondor and of Rohan, like you've met them all. You've been in their home villages. You've met their families. You know, like it's, and again, so now by this time it's like 200 hours of gameplay, right? And again, just the payoff when we're grieving people at the end. I mean, like you have come to know Daraphin and Duelin really well by that point, and their dad. And so grieving with their father over the death of his sons, you know, whom you have adventured with like 5 times already before the battle, and then are alongside during the battle when they die. Anyway, it's such a cool effect. I mean, it's an MMO like that has like tons of opportunity because they've got nothing but time, right? Can dilate it indefinitely, essentially, which much more than we can do in this kind of an environment. And yet, again, I was feeling a version of that same thing when this battle came in, and it's like everybody here is somebody that we understand, somebody that we know really well. And you can feel how, and that was also then was kind of growing all the way through as everybody else was saying goodbye, and we're beginning to get that sense of like the you know, everybody converging on the battlefield. And again, we have even the people that we know relatively little, like Gwyndor, we've only met recently. I mean, we just got him in the season a few episodes ago for the first time. So
I mean, the first time doing anything significant.
Right. We saw him
screen.
Before. We saw him before,
we didn't know him until the season. Like,
we're not invested in him like we're invested in Hurin or even Maedhros and them. But of course, and even Ulfang and Bor, we're invested in now, such that again I found myself being like, ooh, I wonder what Ulfang is thinking. No, I know just what Ulfang must be thinking at this point. You know, it's really cool. So anyway, I really loved that effect, and I could sort of sense that building, that it's gonna make episodes 11 through 13 really powerful.
Brutal, I think, is the word you're looking for.
That also brutal. Yes. Yes. Every person who died, again, like the Battle of the Pelennor Field in the game, when
Right.
instead of a list of names of people, most of whom you've never heard of until their names are sung in the elegy right after the battle, you know every single one of them. So yeah, no, it is a fun effect. It is a great luxury of being able to expand the story in the way that that we do here. Anyway, okay, so we get the fun battle, and then we set off. Azakal leading the dwarven commandos up through the mountains towards Rivil's Well with the goal of destroying the brood, Glaurung's brood.
Yes.
So by the way, what's the size of like baby dragons?
I'm glad you asked that, because somebody asked me that in the editing of this episode, specifically in reference to the head. The head that we, and I, my official line was, I'm going to leave that up to the production designer. However,
a sensible piece of cowardice.
I mean, I would say that even the young dragons are like. Because you got to imagine that even smallish, they're still long, right? Because even if the thing is only like 3 feet, like 3 feet amidships, right? It's going to be like 30 feet long.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the way they're described sounds very much like alligators, crocodiles levels of things.
They were like compared to crocodiles.
I would go
bigger. Well, there's some really big crocodiles in the world.
Have
you ever seen a big one?
Yes.
They're a big alligator. Like, these are terrifying.
Like saltwater crocodiles,
Deinosuchus is probably the size I'd be looking for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But because I've been to Gator World down in Orlando.
Yeah, no, that's not the same.
I mean, it's really awesome.
Right. Yeah. So we're talking again. We had this conversation before. Young dragons, not wormlings, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Such that the head of the one baby dragon that gets brought back is
you could probably sit inside the skull.
Right.
It has to be big enough to concern all Fang and Boar.
Right. They have to be seriously impressed. Yes. Yeah. So the orc guard. So let's, because that's all right. So we were looking at the canyon one, and hang on, let me make sure I understand all of your markings. The maroon stripes here are the Feanorians.
Yes.
Yep, so Maedhros and the Feanorians here. The red spot is where he's supposed to come.
That's the orcs that are massing.
Oh, that's the orcs. Right. Because the orcs are going to charge them. Right. And then end up charging their flanks when they turn to. Yeah.
Right. Now the spots up in the dashes up in the trees there, those are the Feanorian Rangers.
Yeah.
Their whole job is to screen to make sure that they don't get surrounded by archers in this canyon. They're marching like they're in a vulnerable position.
Yes.
On purpose.
Yes.
But let's not get
let's not get
ourselves trapped.
Yes.
Right. And then you have the orange dots are like the 2-man teams of ballisteers.
Right. The dwarves. Yes. Okay. Right. So I understood this whole layout much more clearly. And it was Maedhros' hope that he was just going to come charging down the pipe here. Right.
That was the hope.
That was the hope.
Because
that didn't happen, and so now he has to try to lure him down into the gully itself.
Right. And we didn't even say when we were talking about this scene before, one of the other real benefits of this was really of this whole thing, like all of episode 10, did a really great job establishing Maedhros, I felt. His leadership position, the moment of him defying the dragon and not being drawn in, and both the evidence of the power of the dragon.
Blink.
No, exactly. He's totally unimpressed by the dragon, in a way that doesn't undermine Glaurung, but really builds up him.
Because everybody, you feel it.
Yeah.
Everybody responds to it, but him.
Exactly.
And yet he still does answer Glaurung's question.
Yes.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say he's totally.
No. But yeah.
Like he doesn't flinch, but
Right.
he's still having
But
a
he kind
conversation
of takes
with
the bait
Glaurung,
too. Yeah, exactly.
which is
yeah.
already a mistake.
Right.
Well, I think that he for sure
calculated.
justifies it.
Right.
Justifies it.
Yes.
To himself. Yes.
Yes.
Rationalizes it, maybe. In fact.
Yes.
Yeah. So like he's doing this for a reason, and it's part of the calculation of, well, what do I have to do to get this dragon to come down here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I especially like the way that he lures Glaurung out of hiding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he's got a sense that he's out there somewhere. Right. Like this can't be it. Like there's no way.
Right.
Because these guys have no shot.
Right. As soon as he sees the orcs, he's like, okay, yeah, this is a devious plan is underway. A devious draconian plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, so between that and showing Maedhros being unstoppable on the battlefield, all of those things I thought really framed Maedhros really very effectively.
I was really hoping to capture Marie's imagination with my descriptions of Maedhros on the battlefield.
I knew those were in there for me.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, thanks, Nick. But I mean, obviously it is something that putting in a script, this person looks really cool and amazing. It's like, okay, that's going to be in the hands of the director, because you can look really dumb
right.
Yes.
if it's not handled right. But
yeah,
I appreciated the effort of like Maedhros killing orcs as he was always meant to do.
Yes, exactly. Well, and this is, I think that this is really important, because this moment we are approaching this. We are very near now Maedhros's high water mark for the rest of his life.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, this is his moment. This is his greatest moment, and I think that that's really important.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
Now, Glaurung's dialogue, I don't think is as it was tough, because like the more he talks, the harder it is to follow the model, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, he gets into kind of a longish little speech at some point, and so having to have him verbally suss out what's going on while peppering in like the kind of like dripping with condescension kind of thing was kind of the way that I approached that, like in the moment where he figures out what's going on.
Yeah. No, I like the conversation. I agree it doesn't need to be longer, but I definitely wasn't feeling that it was that it overstayed its welcome in that way. I thought that it worked out really well. Okay, so he turns back. They shoot at him, but they don't get a clean shot, which is very understandable.
I think they get a couple of they get a couple of them to stick on him, but it's not enough to do anything.
Yeah, he's not seriously hampered. Then so the walls of the canyon are scalable by people, by non-dragons.
Scalable, yes, but I would say not like easily. Like I believe that these Feanorian soldiers could get up there,
right?
Given time. It would certainly take them. By the time they got up there, he'd be flat out gone.
Yeah, that was one of the things. That was the one element of this that I was having a harder time imagining, because we had Maedhros and the Feanorians turning and like chasing him or attempting to chase him, and then the orcs coming in on their flank,
right?
Because they've like basically forgotten about the orcs, because who cares? With
right,
is right there,
right.
But it was the charging after him that I was struggling with, because I'm like, isn't that a wall? Can't they not?
I mean, even I mean, like if it's less than 20 feet high, they can get up.
They
there.
can get up it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, even in armor, like they can just start like cheerleader flinging guys up the thing. They'll get up there for sure.
They'll get up there. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And since Orlando Bloom has taught us that elves can ignore gravity at times of need, then, you know, presumably it would work. But that was, again, that was the thing I was having a harder time imagining. That Maedhros knows what's going on, or that he figures out that Glaurung has figured it out and is therefore desperate to pursue him, works.
But just, how are they?
How are they doing it? Or is it just Maedhros and, you know, the rest of them fighting the orcs or something? You know, the ones that are down in the canyon.
Yeah, my intention was that once the orcs have engaged them, now they're kind of stuck. They got to deal with these guys.
Yeah.
Which,
and I mean, presumably once the orcs are gone, you can just continue down the canyon and get out.
Which is going to be way easier than
but also way too late
easier to fight through these orcs than it is to climb these walls.
For all of them. Yeah. But I would think Maedhros would be extremely impatient and eager, knowing what was happening. And so him, I would expect, even if he's the only one, to go up the cliff.
But I don't think they get, like, he's gone before they even get to the wall.
Right.
Yeah. And before they can kind of like reform and figure out what they're going to do next, the orcs are on them, and we cut from there. And the next time we see them, obviously they've won through. They've put they've chased what orcs survived this encounter all the way back to Rivil's Well.
Right. Okay. So yes, I could imagine Maedhros' scene here sort of ending with him leaping / being hoisted up the cliff, and the surviving rangers up there falling in with him and rushing off with him, because there'd be a bunch of Feanorian rangers up there.
Yeah. I think that what I was imagining is that they deal with this. Because even when these orcs show up, like they know that these guys have no shot against them.
Yes.
Like Maedhros is not in any way challenged by these guys, and so
which is why he leaves his men behind to fight them and goes on his soldiers behind. I would think, wouldn't he?
No. He shows up with all of them when they get to the.
Because I was thinking he's
gonna want them there when they get to Rivil's Well.
Yeah, but he's gonna know there's
gonna be multiple dragons.
Well, yes, but
I see the tension here of, do you wait to take all your guys with you, or does he grab some rangers and go with the assumption that the other guys will catch up soon? Because
I think the latter.
He needs to get to the dragon before the dragon gets to the dwarves.
Yes. And there's no chance. However quickly in relative terms they dispatch the orcs in the canyon, even just going around by canyon to Rivil's Well is going to be longer than taking whatever direct route Glaurung presumably is taking. And he's got to be thinking not just of the dragons at Rivil's Well, but of Azakal, and realizing that Azakal is not expecting Glaurung to come charging in on his flank, as indeed happens, right? And that Maedhros, especially since Maedhros, Mr. like leave the dragon to me, is prepared to fight Glaurung himself rather than leave Azakal on his own.
The only thing I would say is that we've established pretty handily that Glaurung can outrun horses.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
He would know.
They're not catching him.
He would know even that there was no chance, but like he still
has to go as quickly
as possible to take the directest possible route.
And the dwarven ballista stuff is at the top of the cliff, so if
they're still they're a step
up.
Down, so they couldn't
they're
come.
on the way. But you can grab one of the ballista at least and go. There's.
I think that he
There's
would
something you could do
well again
in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would. He's got to have a second in command there in the army, right?
Yeah.
That he would just
He does.
really quickly say,
He's got Amras and he's got his
Amras. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
he would say to Amras, like, finish the orcs and come as fast, come with all speed to Rivil's well, and like, I'm going after the dragon. Boom, off he goes. And everybody would understand that. Again, it wouldn't do anything. The effect would be that he would arrive sooner than the rest of the of the elves.
Here's my only concern beyond my only other concern is that because then it might feel when he gets there that he just gets there too slowly.
Yep.
Right. Rather than he had to fight his way through to get there. I
don't know. I think it's a little more tragical if he almost arrives in time to help Azaghal, but not quite. I mean, Glaurung is faster than he is. Like, there's nothing he can do about that.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone will be able to see that. But, well...
I think it's the question of, does it look like he was lazy to let himself be delayed by orcs? Or does that look like a legitimate, this was the best thing I could do? Because he is going to arrive too late. Azaghal is going to die, and he is going to feel guilty about that. So is the viewer supposed to think he did everything he could and was still too late? Or did he make a misstep to wait until he could bring his whole army with him, and that's why he didn't get there in time? Like, is it a tactical error on his part that made him late, or is it it was completely unavoidable? So I do think we have to make a decision here that influences the later scene.
So I do have concern because it would just require some restructuring of the back end of it as well. Because
let's look at that.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to this again.
Yeah.
Okay. So at Rivil's Well, we have the orcs and we have the small but dense formation of the dwarves.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. The orcs seem a little unnecessary. I mean, if these dragons are each one of them,
well, they're necessary for the story because we don't want to kill too many of the baby dragons before Glaurung gets there.
Right. No, but even if I agree. What I liked about the orcs here is that it gave the opportunity to showcase the actual effectiveness and competence of the dwarves in battle. Like, it was clear they were going to mop the floor with these orcs. And again, that's gives a tantalizing vision of like, man, the dwarves, a whole army of dwarves on the battlefield would be a really, really beneficial, allegiance to have. So I like the fact. So here, this is where I can like do stop action, right? So the orcs, there's way more of the orcs, right? The orcs outnumber them significantly.
At least at the start.
At least they start off outnumbering them, and then the dwarves just cut through them.
Yeah.
And I love that, and I loved how that was described. No, the only sort of downside to the orcs is simply like there's a risk visually, I think. If we see the dragons and the dragon, so like the baby dragons smaller than, what size are they about?
I mean, I'd say that they're still large, but they're long, right? So it's like a horse's medium, right?
Right.
So like these things are still like longer than the largest croc you're gonna see,
right?
And they're they're probably standing well because like if as I recall, Glaurung in this state was like tearing through a small group of elvish horsemen.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
In the woods. So, you know, they're standing probably 8 feet at the shoulder.
Right. 8 feet at the shoulder, and so probably 20 feet long, at least.
Minimum.
I
mean, you include a serious tail, and you're probably
right.
looking at like 30.
Right. So,
yeah, with the tail, I would say closer to 30, probably.
Similar to the size, though less in bulk than a tractor trailer.
I would say maybe as long as your average school bus in length.
Right. Not as tall and bulky. But
no.
Yeah, much more shorter and sinuous, but still 8 feet at the shoulder is not tiny.
Yeah.
Even vertically. Right. So let's go with school bus, just for the sake of it.
Okay, so we have school bus sized dragons.
If there are like 10 school bus sized dragons, a band of orcs protecting them is going to look silly. I think that's the risk. Like, who's guarding whom here? Like, why do they need guards? Why do they need those guards? Like, what on earth is the point? Are the orcs there just to be snacks for the dragons and if they get peckish? Or, I mean, which could be, right? Yeah. Or, you know, but it's the idea that they're like, we are the honor guards.
Zero interest in the young dragons actually ever having to engage in combat until they're ready.
Okay.
I think that's him, you know, like making sure that somebody shows up and he's not there.
Right. So backing up a step or two, Glaurung is not going to be unaware of the intrusion into Ladros.
Right.
Right. So he knows that the allies are attacking. He knows that the main body of the so he's got a bunch of orcs at his disposal as Dragon Lord of Dorloman, of Tarnafu and Dorthonion. Yeah. What did I say?
You said Dorloman.
Dorloman. That's just not yet where he's ruling. Not that he's ever going to specifically rule there, but anyway, yes, of Dorthonion. Anyway, point is, he's in charge. He's got a bunch of orcs. The biggest chunk of his orcs. The biggest chunks of his orcs have already been dealt with, right?
Yes. Yeah.
He knows something is afoot. He also knows that maybe presumably he doesn't actually see the dwarves coming.
No,
through the
I would say that, yeah.
But he is aware of Maedhros' march up, right? So he takes the rest of the orcs. It makes perfect. What else is he going to do with his orcs, right? There's only two things in Dorthonion that he really cares about. And that is the baby dragons and himself.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So he's going to take the rest of the orcs that he has. He's going to split them into two groups.
Right.
He's going to keep some with him and put some with the baby. Right. So on that level, it kind of makes sense.
That he sends down the canyon is basically just a nominal force. Like it's just enough for it to be.
Right.
Yeah, here's some guys.
Right.
Hang out there for a second while I figure out what you're doing.
Right. Right. In a sense, he's trying to bait them with the orcs. It's counterbait, right? Yeah. So he's going to leave more of the orcs here for as much reason as he doesn't know what to do with them and doesn't have anything. You know, like this is kind of the center of his power here. Okay. This is me trying to talk myself into this. Like I'm trying to, because the idea of like, oh no, like protect my children seems totally inappropriate under the circumstances.
Well, I mean, on one hand though, like he doesn't want any of them to get hurt or die. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, Salty say going well. Yes, absolutely. Well, of course, the exact part of the story that we're talking about was never written by Tolkien at all. This exact part is our invention here. But yes, the story of Glaurung and the Glaurung's role in the Silmarillion all of it was written before 1954. Even the Children of Hurin is finished prior to 1954.
And I somehow doubt that Tolkien ever saw Godzilla.
You can't rule it out. You know,
I don't know if it made it to Europe for a while.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know anything about the cinematic history of Godzilla. If it was,
that seems like something that we'd be interested in over here in the 50s. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think there's evidence that we were interested in it in the 50s,
yes,
but
obviously.
but yeah, no, I have no idea. Again, it sometimes surprises me. Like you find out, Tolkien read Dune, and yes, he read Isaac Asimov, and so there's lots of things that you might assume Tolkien didn't know that he did in fact know.
I know for a fact that Tolkien did watch movies, because I know of at least one. I know that at the very least he did see Snow White.
Snow White, exactly.
Because my understanding is that C.S. Lewis went there with his brother, who loved it. And C.S. Lewis hated it so much that he invited his best friend, his friend Tolkien, to come out to see it so they could make fun of it together.
Most amazing MST3K. Like, could you imagine having recorded commentary of Tolkien and Lewis watching Snow White? I mean, that would be the priceless recording that never happened. Like,
yes,
oh my
agreed.
Goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm sure they both had opinions.
Yeah. Me too. And I'm not even sure they would have agreed. Like that they would have been the same opinion, but they both would have had opinions.
They both would have had very strong opinions.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is one of my favorite what ifs from Tolkien's life, actually. But that is like what if we had a recording of that. One of the biggest fly on the wall moments that I would choose in Tolkien's life. But anyway, okay, so it would almost be kind of cooler then if instead of standing like, we shall defend the baby dragons who are 50 times bigger than we are each individually with our lives, the orcs are just kind of like they're milling around. They'll see the dwarves come in, right? Yeah. And then they'll kind of, not that orcs exactly form up anyway, but like they will
respond.
They'll respond.
I think there will be times at which orcs will have that level of organization. I don't think that these orcs specifically do.
Right. Yeah.
And they kind of just mass on the dwarves, and it goes incredibly poorly for them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So and this was my favorite part of this incident. I loved really showcasing the dwarves and how good they were. And then Glaurung comes in and rips through them. Okay, so I guess let me look at it. If you got Glaurung coming in, and
well, this is the second map of that.
Oh, right. Okay, so this is the first charge.
Right.
So this is the first charge when he's on his own.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so there's a scene break
in between. Yeah.
Right. So there's a scene break here. The next scene is when Maedhros and his guys and the orcs they've been chasing arrive. Yes.
Okay. And so one of the things that you were talking about would need to be reorganized is that here you have, because the orcs are arriving in retreat first.
In like pell-mell.
Yes. Total panic. Yes.
But between the elves and the dragons is the point.
Right. Which is really kind of the thing I'm
so you're wanting to screen Glaurung from the elves, essentially.
Yes.
So that he and Azakal have free reign. So then after this, you've got, so this basically is the moment when he and Azakal have their fight.
Yeah. Right around that's the scene where that happens for sure.
And then after that, the baby dragons come out and Glaurung is left because Azakal wounded him. But now the baby dragons are out and we've got remnant orcs on both sides, but you've got the elves coming up behind.
Yeah.
What happens So the baby dragons, it's mostly the dwarves who are killing the baby dragons?
So okay, because this changed a little bit from the time that I made this map to during our script discussion to the actual script writing. So what happens now is that the dwarves are dealing with the young dragons attacking them, because the young dragons are already kind of coming up out of the water as the dwarves are getting closer to them. They're not gonna just hide out in there. Right. They're gonna take care of business.
So when Glaurung comes in, right, the dwarves have just chewed through the orc lines.
Essentially, yeah.
And the baby dragons are emerging, and that looks like what's about to happen, right? We've got the dwarves having defeated essentially the orcs. Right. They're now lowering weapons and preparing to charge, and the dragons are emerging, and it looks like we're going to get the baby dragon fight that we were expecting. And then whammo.
And then Glaurung comes in, and now the young dragons are like, okay, well,
Daddy's home.
Yeah, we're gonna
right.
It's time. It's time to go here. And the dwarves' tactics and weapons are effective against the young dragons.
Yes.
It's not perfectly effective. Some of the young dragons get through, but none of them are like just plowing over them the way that Glaurung is. They probably don't have the weight to do it.
Yes.
They probably just don't have the size. They probably can't vault over a hedge of spears in the same way.
Well, that would be poor form, is presumably their undersides are a little more vulnerable anyway. Yeah. So they wouldn't want to go over the top. So Glaurung, the baby dragons would probably not be able to just, because the dwarves are in a tight formation.
Yeah.
Glaurung has the momentum and the mass to blow it open. Right. He can charge in and smash.
And so some of the young dragons are following in his wake. Right. And so they're but they're essentially, like, if you imagine the dwarven formation as a living creature, right? Like they're like chewing at it.
Right. Yes. That's what but he's already shattered it.
Right.
So he shatters through. Baby dragons come in behind. Do they come into the breach, or the dwarves close the breach?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
I would say that I would say that there's a lot more chaos happening at this point than the dwarves would generally like. This isn't the way that this was supposed to go down. They're still relatively prepared for this situation. And I think that Azaghal is perfectly. Azaghal is of the belief that they can handle what's going on.
Right.
Something's gone wrong somewhere, but they can still handle this.
Yes, he is still. And this was another thing that I felt was a really sort of fun payoff. And this is a thing that could have happened on the regular battlefield anyway, but I did like Azaghal's attitude to Glaurung, right?
Yeah, the taunt.
His taunting of him, and his, Azaghal's entire attitude of like, so instead of just fighting all of these smaller dragons, we're fighting all the small dragons and the big dragon. All right,
cool.
Let's do this, right? Like that was a fun moment with Azaghal. Okay, so when it comes to the next thing, so one thing I'm having a hard time understanding is how. Okay. All right, walk me through the rest of these pictures. So we've got the fleeing orcs and the elves arriving here in this picture. Right. Now, what's happened here? We've got, how did those, how did the orcs get over there?
Okay. So what happens here is that
Glaurung is
this has happened. This is after Glaurung has taken off.
And Azaghal's
when Glaurung takes off, the young dragons are like, you know, they also leave.
Right.
Any orcs that don't have anybody between them and the way out are leaving.
Okay.
They want nothing more to do with the situation. So now the dwarves are approaching, are now in song mode. Like they're dirging.
They're dirging. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
They're dirging their way down towards.
So everything up in the top of this map is all on its way out.
It's over.
It's over. They're fleeing. All of them are fleeing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Glaurung flees. The baby dragons flee behind him. The remnant of the orcs, the orc guards, go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And then these orcs want nothing to do with this situation, period.
Yeah.
And now they're finding themselves being pressed up against these singing
dwarves.
Dwarves.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't even know what to do with that.
Right.
Like did they were allowed to sing? Like what?
Right. Well, and again, as you say, the orcs were in a panic even to begin, and now on top of the fact that they're finding another foe in front of them, as well as the terrifying elves chasing them from behind, it's also like they can't even parse what the dwarves in front of them are doing. That seems a perfectly understandable circumstance in which the orcs are just gonna, so they part around them and run away. Right.
Yeah, essentially.
They just leave them alone, keep running.
The Feanorians are like, you guys go right on ahead. If you like if they're gonna stop and talk to us, we'll for sure do that. But they aren't. We're not doing that.
Right. Okay. We're just leaving. Okay. Got it. Right. Yes. Okay. Right. I see how that works. Okay. So what you're thinking when you were talking about having to reconfigure things, what you lose. So let's go back and look at my rashly suggested plan B, where Maedhros shows up here.
Yeah.
On his own, or with with the rangers from that side of the with like
a handful of guys.
A dozen people. Yeah.
I'm thinking of nothing more, and the timing would seem to me to work out, like given their relative speed, that he shows up just in time to see Azakal die. Basic, because it's not a long sequence from when Glaurung gets there to when Azakal dies, and so there's no scenario in which Maedhros could have made it in time. But anyway, I kind of like the idea. So, like, what if, this is adding an unnecessary or investing in an unnecessary level of detail to your very simple map here. But I'm imagining now that the right side, the bottom right of the green open space where the fight is happening is higher in elevation, right? Sloping down to the water, right?
That makes sense. Yes.
So I'm imagining Maedhros coming in here and standing on this high spot. He arrives just in time to see the fight with Azakal and the dragon run off. So he never gets a shot at the dragon because the dragon is, by the time he's standing there, the dragon is like, if we imagine the momentum of his dragging of Azakal and this while Azakal is stabbing him, that's all going upwards.
We do lose the hope spot of the arrival of the Feanorian army, though. Which
we can still have them. I don't think the Feanorian army is far behind him. Maedhros, I mean. Maedhros would just arrive a little bit in advance. So let me finish spelling out. So what I'm saying is,
go.
Maedhros is standing there on the higher ground. He's arrived just in time, and he sees Azakal stab Glaurung, but then thump Azakal's body, and then Glaurung takes off, and he's standing there, and he's like, oh man, and there's nothing he can do. Like, everybody's leaving, the battle's over, Azakal's dead. Then the orcs and Feanorians come in, just like you said, like from his left, Maedhros' left.
Yeah.
Right. He sees Now, and there can be this moment, right, where he's stunned, the dwarves are stunned, the orcs and the dragons are fleeing. They take and gather around the body of Azekal. Like, Maedhros then is the witness of them, gathering.
Dirging.
Yeah, they raising the body, forming up into their dirge formation. He's the one who hears them begin to sing. Just as they begin to sing and come in, the orcs come charging over the hill. And it looks for a moment from Maedhros' perspective and from our perspective that the dwarves who are no longer armed, right? They're at least they're not wielding their weapons anymore. They have their masks up or whatever. That it looks like it could still be kind of a disaster if they're caught in mid grief and he's like, what's going to happen? And then but they just keep dirging and the orcs, he would have a great vantage point of the orcs parting around them and just running away and the Fëanorians coming up. So that would be my suggested sort of sequence for that. Because it doesn't seem like anybody, once Glaurung is struck by Azekal, the fight's over. Once Azekal dies and Glaurung runs away, the fight's over.
Right. Now, but what you're suggesting now is having, so Maedhros now arrives much later in the scene, right? So as written, he's arriving like pretty much in the opening, a couple of minutes in the opening minute of the scene. Okay. And you're essentially having him arrive like, I guess maybe halfway through. Well, it's not even halfway through because the fight, even though it's the longest part of the description, the fight is probably over in less than a minute.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, because the only fight
that he's only getting there like right at the tail end there.
But he wouldn't. How could he see more? I mean, if given the amount of Glaurung is literally going to come flying in, bulldoze through the dwarf formation once, right? Like turn and come back and in response to Azakal's taunt and come after Azekal, and then they fight and then again. So I mean, as you say, the whole thing would be like 45 seconds.
Yeah,
including the taunt. So even if Maedhros is booking it, right, with no delay, right, he's come straight after him. He's still barely going to get there in time to see Glaurung leave.
So there's a scene break between the time that Glaurung arrives and the first onset and the fight between Azekal and
okay, so we get
and Glaurung. So we don't know for
we get the
sure.
bowling ball action, and then scene break,
right,
and then return, taunt, fight,
right. So we don't necessarily know how many passes he's made in the intervening time.
Okay.
While Rian and Kuor have been crying together.
Right. In which case, like, I'd be happy him showing up, like, at the beginning of the second part of that scene.
Okay.
Like, him just showing up in time to see the taunt, to see the Glaurung's charge. He can't get there in time. Because, again, like, he wouldn't. Like, Glaurung is faster than he is. Like, he wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think that the men who fought the ones who fought the orcs would be further behind. Like, there's no way they could. I mean, howsoever quickly they cut through the orcs.
Well, they don't even cut through them. Like, the orcs have run.
Right. So they're just driving the orcs before them to get out of this canyon.
Right.
But I would still think the canyon would be more indirect than the route that Glaurung was taking.
I mean, through the woods, it's. I mean, honestly, the Glaurung probably gets down into the canyon further down. It's probably way faster for him.
I mean, he has his own path through Dorthonion. He's been living there for years.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is near Rivil's Well, which is his base. So, like, I'm not worried about there being a dragon path that the dragon takes.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that I don't necessarily. I mean, it could be less direct. The canyon could be less direct, but I don't necessarily think we can
know that.
Yeah, it is what we make it. right? Like either it's the most direct route or it's not. It's up to us. But I mean that's fine. We can
It
do
feels
that.
like the narrative momentum is Glaurung goes herring off, he's going to get there first.
Yeah, for sure.
If the idea of you're going through the orcs, and again, I know even with the orcs turning and running right away, the visual effect that's been left is Glaurung going off in this direction and the elves charging this way.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
we could ask people to be like, just try. So Glaurung headed off this way, but that was actually the slow route, right? And these elves almost beat him there,
for sure.
right?
Yeah. No,
like that would be hard to get people to, even if it's reasonable, it
Yeah.
would be hard to get people to understand. So that's why it feels to me like to
Like
capture
seeing-
Maedhros' urgency, seeing
You have to see him
Maedhros
go in the same direction
Yes,
as
like,
the dragon.
even
Yeah.
just to convey the idea, like I am pursuing Glaurung, like it's
right. Visually, if not necessarily tactically.
tactically, yeah, exactly, and because like it would seem silly if like the fleeing orcs almost beat Glaurung back here, right? And I kind of love the idea of Maedhros
Also, we don't know how
personal
far
pursuit
sorry,
anyway, that image. I mean, it's not as heroic as standing before the charge of Glaurung alone, but the image of him, pelting down the path after Glaurung, like personally chasing, like he's hunting. We think about the hunt of Glaurung in season 5 with Fingon and the horse archers, right? And here's Maedhros on foot chasing Glaurung, all by himself, like out in front. Which also is kind of a Feanorian memory too. Like he's looking a little bit like his dad in that moment, chasing down the enemies.
I was going to say, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but Glaurung getting away is pretty disastrous. So doing something about it makes some sense.
Yeah. This is
okay.
This wasn't plan B or C or anything for him to chase Glaurung down personally. But again, I'm mindful of what he said. He was like, leave the dragon to me, right? When it came to it, he was always willing to put himself, and he is more willing to, if he, under whatever circumstance, he could get there on time. If he had gotten there in time, he absolutely would have challenged Glaurung instead of just letting Glaurung kill Azakal.
Yeah.
He would rather have fought him himself.
I'm fine doing it. It does change the kind of up and down flow. Like is this going to go positively? Is this going to go negatively? Feel of that scene. It's a lot more flat that way because there's nothing new happens. Because the way that the scene is written, the Glaurung clearly feels like he is fully in control of the situation. Then the Noldor show up and it changes that dynamic. So whereas Glaurung is physically far superior to Azakal, no matter how you slice it, it has changed his position on the field is now way more precarious. And if we remove that, then that shift never happens, which is okay.
Well, but I don't see how, if the panicked fleeing orcs that are in front of the Feanorians only arrive in time to not attack the dirging dwarves, then I don't see how the Feanorians arrive in time to create that effect anyway. Because if the dwarves are already dirging, Azagal's already dead, and Glaurung's already fleeing. So by the time the Feanorians arrive,
which happens before as written, it happens before the fight takes place, like the personal fight between Azagal and Glaurung.
Then what do the orcs do? The fleeing orcs do.
The orcs are in between, and that's why the elves don't get to the dragon in time.
Right.
But why do the orcs stop running?
Because there's
a dragon in the way?
They're still fighting dwarves.
Then why are the elves not slaying them in droves if they've stopped? Because
they will be. They are in fact doing that.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing is taking place over a minute, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
part of
it's-
the issue here.
it is
that
very tight.
It's all happening at once. It's very
Yeah.
chaotic, but that sense of switching who's in charge in the battle because of who arrives and all that. If the elves arriving doesn't actually do anything to help the dwarves out, because it doesn't, then that upbeat of like, oh, maybe they'll be in time to help out. Oh, just kidding, they're not. Like, it's still disappointing. I'm not saying that flat is better.
Right. No, but
the new forces show up and then don't change anything is also very unsatisfying.
But I think that Maedhros himself, so if he's closer to in time, like again, I was imagining both the Feanorians and Maedhros showing up like substantially too late. But if you're wanting to change the tenor of the fight with Glaurung, couldn't that be accomplished by Maedhros personally?
Because there'd be fewer orcs between him and the dragon.
There'd be no orcs between him and the dragon, or I mean, the ones that
The
already got
scattered
their
ones.
butts kicked. But
Yeah.
I mean,
So, like,
that would barely be
him
an
being
obstacle
there,
to him. Yeah.
Like, then it really is just that he can't run down the hill fast enough to stop Glaurung from killing Azaghal. There's nothing in between.
Or even as that, it's a calculated decision. We could even I mean, I don't know what the visibility would be like in this valley, but it's even possible that Glaurung can see Maedhros charging at him
And go after Azaghal.
and he could even potentially see like the Feanorians and the orcs back
Coming
a ways, like quarter mile down the valley, like they're coming. He sees the orcs in retreat. He sees the elves coming, but he sees Maedhros right there, coming right at him. And yes, he opts for taking out Azaghal instead, which then again looks like a calculated move on his part, not unlike the calculations that Glaurung was doing before.
Okay, here's an alternative. Here's an alternative situation. To give that same hope spot thing, have Azaghal, like, instead of just like he's in a stare down with Glaurung, he's like fresh off of beheading one of the young dragons, and this is the dragon head that winds up.
Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
I like that.
And he does it, and like immediately he's got his eyes locked on Glaurung, like, what you can do about it, big boy.
Right. He's still has like his axe lodged in the skull of the baby
system.
dragon, right? And he does his taunt like while he's wrenching the axe, the bloody axe out of the yeah, exactly.
Rather than trying to engineer a situation where like Maedhros is looking like Miss Clavel running fast and faster to get to a fight that he doesn't get to. And then you can have him, as you said before, show up and just in time to witness it, not in time to do anything.
Like Maglor always does, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's not unknown, that phenomenon of like, I've arrived just in time to be a witness to the horrible thing I failed to stop, is not an unknown, thing in this proximate story. But of course, the other thing that I mean, one of the things that I like about involving Maedhros more in this way is that it shows his commitment. It shows his leadership, not just of his own people, but of all the people. I mean, it's like how personally he takes this responsibility to help Azaghal and the dwarves with whom he has made this alliance. It gives him like even more of a sort of a hero moment. I mean, the image of him not only chasing down the dragon, but almost chasing it, like the dragon chooses to fight Azaghal instead, and Azaghal accomplishes this great thing. But also, like, the dragon kind of ran away from Maedhros, right? Or at least,
one interpretation, yeah.
There, again, obviously, much of that would be accomplished by the director. But I think that there are some.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, with part of the goal of telling the story in this way was to get more interaction with the characters.
Yeah.
Instead of sweeping battle scenes. Like obviously we have some of those too, but finding that balance between them. So
right. Besides which, having like Maedhros almost accomplish something awesome is a little bit microcosmic, don't you think?
Sadly,
Right.
I'll have to delete one of my descriptions of Maedhros in battle.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, Nick, like, yes, I do think the guy is awesome when he fights orcs, like, by definition.
And there's no reason he couldn't kill a few orcs on his way as he's charging, the dragon.
It's just like that's not necessarily what the story is.
I know. I'm just teasing.
And
I know.
He'll still have plenty of chances.
I know, because there's another episode or so after this.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like you said, he's almost at his high water mark.
Yeah. Yep.
He's not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet, but very, very close. Anyway, it's not absolutely necessary. I'm just I would love
something you wanted to see.
Yeah, and it felt more compelling. I think throughout that, I was thinking primarily of Maedhros' character, that how he responds, that he's gonna make a beeline following as much, even to the, he's gonna leave his men behind because charging his folks into battle, charging with them is less important to him. They've got it. He can trust them. They trust him. He's going after, you chase down the orcs and I'll chase down the dragon.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I already spent a long time on this, so
Okay.
let's look at the other 18 stories that form the B plot. But there's not too many of them that I think we have to talk about in detail. First of all,
some of them are logistic, yeah.
Some of them are exactly. And some of them, how did it feel to suddenly get a big chunk of dialogue out of the book? Out of the Children of Hurin, at least, right? I mean, not that much dialogue, but still a scene, right? Straight out of the Children of Hurin.
Because I sad to say, my copy of Children of Hurin disappeared with my library years ago. Yes.
But yeah, so it was funny. That was actually one of the kind of moments that I had several moments when I was going through these various different scenes. And that was one when we got the scene with Hurin and Turin. It took me a few beats before I realized that this was that scene. This is the farewell scene, right? This is Hurin riding off and departing Dorthonion for the last time. I was, I kind of had this perking up moment, right? When I was like, yes, another cute scene with Turin. I'm like, no, wait, this is the scene. This is it right here. That was really cool. The handing off of the dragon helm. We do have Hurin bearing Narsil into battle, right?
Yes.
So we had Morwen giving him Narsil. I know we have a plan for that. I'm not going to sidetrack because I'm talking about that more. We'll get there later on. But anyway, that's fine. So Hurin goes off with Narsil, but he leaves Turin the dragon helm. And loved the final advice of Hurin to his son. I was cheering One thing you must always remember, son, and never forget this, that you are not the master of your own fate. This is the most important take-home lesson that I can leave you as a dad in my departing moments. And I go to battle trusting that you've really taken that to heart.
He did everything he could. He really did.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that we can legitimately lay any of the stuff that happens to Turin at Hurin's feet, other than he went to war.
Other than he went to war, yeah.
And defied Morgoth.
Which was not wrong.
Like,
Which was not wrong.
Curse your family.
Was just what he should have done. Hurin did nothing wrong, yeah.
One of the things that I really wanted to play with in these little vignettes was kind of a more realistic treatment of war than we're typically asked to consider.
I was feeling that with the Hondir and Haldir conversation,
throughout the whole thing, really.
But that one in particular.
That one in particular really comes to a head.
Like reading that, I'm just like, okay, is this still a Tolkien story, or are we talking Game of Thrones here? Like, at what point? We didn't. But I was making sure, because I'm like, I am nervous about what levels we're hitting here.
For sure.
So, no, it's okay. It's okay. There was still enough honor.
It was all right. Tease at the cost to everybody involved, whether you win or lose, or what, like everything that was going to come down after this, right? And to kind of to set all of that up. Because I feel like the Near-Ninth is the time to do that, you know, because they're going to lose so magnificently. Badly. Yeah.
And we have reason to believe that, like, the culture of the Haladin goes downhill a bit. It's not just that they're in a more vulnerable position militarily.
Like, this is it. This is it for them. Yeah. Like,
Brandir doesn't get to where he's at.
Right.
From the Hondir that we have in episodes 6 and 7. Yeah. Like something changes the way that Brandir was raised.
Exactly. So that was, I felt it appropriate there. Like there is going to be a lot that some, especially among the Edain, are being set up for a period of disillusionment and loss of their ideals. That seems important.
Yeah,
and that's the thing, is I don't think it was out of place. And the part that made me nervous was the idea of, it sounded like he was going to say that it's your job to convince your men to go run into battle and die.
Right.
Whether or not you think they're going to like live.
Right.
And it's like,
which is still.
It's not untrue.
True.
Right, but just again, it's
a bunch of these dudes are gonna die.
Right. It's just, we don't want to go too Machiavellian with it, but
right. Yeah. No, exactly. It's not going to be like, your job, son, is to convince those poor saps to go die while you stand, behind and to stay safe.
It's a slightly more cynical version of the King Loon speech. Where the
nature of a true king.
Yes, to wear finer clothes over our poorer meal.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also I'm contrasting that with Hurin, because Turin's like, but like, could you just not go?
Right.
Like, what would be the harm if you just didn't go?
Right.
Like, really?
Right.
And Hurin's, I have to.
Right. I have to, Turin, because I am making the right choice. So pay attention to how that works. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I like the listen to your mother.
Yes. Yeah. No, the parting, but the way in which that all of his interactions with Turin and Morwen both were very pregnant with the story to come. Turin and Morwen's story to come all felt very very good, very appropriate. That was all excellent. Similarly, though, ironically, with Hor and Rian as well.
Yeah, that was another one where like she says the thing, like she. Right. I don't think there's anybody in Tolkien who expresses what she's expressing here, but she clearly feels that way.
And there are some good reasons for, again, it's a genre difference as much as anything else, right? I mean, like it's Mike Drought leans in this direction much more than I tended to do, but I don't wholly disagree with him when he does. He goes a little further than I would, I think, when basically the point that he often makes is when we hear people talk in The Lord of the Rings, it's not like it's not like we're there overhearing,
right?
Like this is a constructed thing, you know.
Yes.
Like on the Battle of Pelennor Field, did Éomer actually suddenly speak in verse? You know,
right?
Mighty was the fallen, meet was his ending, right? I mean, it's not impossible that he did.
I say, based on his culture.
Exactly. It's always like, possible because of that. Yeah. But at the same time,
I bet you your buddy Eminem could totally come up
do
with
it spontaneously.
Like
yes,
spot,
exactly. Right.
I'm not saying Éomer.
I'm much more concerned about the fact that he threw his sword up in the air and then caught it.
Exactly. Like basically the description of how things work, what people say and when, and like it's there are many points, especially when the action is very dramatic, when there is this sense of like, this is for posterity, right? Or in other words, this is reconstructed after the fact. Once these matters have become legend, this is being retold in a way that is fitting to that legend and may or may not be exactly what it looked like and felt like on the ground.
Right.
That kind of mythic legendary overlay is one of the things that makes the story so powerful. But when you think about, so Nick, this just goes back to the Rian thing, right? It's not that none of Tolkien's characters ever think things like that, right? Or that it's like an inappropriate thought. But you don't hear people talking that way because that's not how the great people in the legends, like Sam talks about on the stairs of Cirith Ungol, would talk in the legends that you hear, right?
Yeah, it's the hagiography treatment.
Yes.
Like, there are certain things that you say or you do in the life of a saint, and you just make that fit the person. You don't necessarily. The person didn't necessarily fit the story before you told the story about the person.
Yeah.
It's just the style of storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly. So yeah, that's exactly what I mean by genre difference, right? That I think it's not only good, but I think it's appropriate. Where the line to walk to have that sort of thing be said aloud that isn't said aloud in Tolkien, and yet still have it be a Tolkien story, right?
Right.
Is to make sure that you're not, if you are undermining the actual choices that people are making,
right?
Yeah.
Then that's where you've crossed the line, right? Yeah. But it's okay for them to talk about
question those choices.
For them to doubt.
Like any rational person
yes
in that situation should and would
surely would. Yes. And occasionally we'll get that from the hobbits, right? Like Pippin before the Battle of Minas Tirith, right? Like there will be moments when the hobbits will give us that kind of frank speaking, Sam complaining about stuff and whatever, right? But
Gimli saying those Uruk-hai looked over large for me.
Yes. So I sat back to observe your swordplay. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That is kind of on the line itself.
What were you doing? Taking a nap, dude?
Yeah,
you had it covered.
Didn't look like you needed me. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So. But yes, I think all of that stuff works. I liked the final awkward conversation between Gwyndor and Finduilas. I like where that left things in. Again, that is one where we're treading a very delicate path.
For sure.
Which is Tolkien's fault. Like he's left us a challenging task there, which he doesn't really take up because, again, it's not that kind of story. And we've talked about this, the like, how do you, with Finduilas in particular. But anyway, I in general, I like that. I thought that came out, that walked that line successfully. I really enjoyed and was not expecting the transition to Gil-galad and Orodreth. That was fun. Both
that came out of the script discussion.
Yeah, both to hear Orodreth's perspective and Gil-galad, coming in. My favorite line was when Orodreth, refers to the letter to Thingol, and he's like, I remember that. Come now. One of the most traumatic moments of my hitherto relatively short life. Yeah.
But I like the idea of giving Gil-galad as many different perspectives as possible, because having multiple generations of perspectives to base his decision making on is part of why he is the longest running king.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and the demise of Morgoth helps with the longest running High King.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little less pressure for most of the Second Age, admittedly, but
sure.
But still,
But yes, he does have that opportunity. He's younger than everybody, but that meant he got to pick up wisdom from a variety of places, and I do like that we've given Orodreth some insight.
Yeah,
he's not a great leader, sure, but he's not an idiot.
But he's not an idiot. Yeah, no, right. I did feel that there was some
depth to his.
Yeah, some ground that was kind of accomplished in helping to contextualize Orodreth's issue.
And he's another one who gets to say the true things about what war does.
Yep. Briefly, I don't want to go into it because we've talked about this before, but I know not everyone's with us sequentially. The reason original Finduilas is a problem is that she and Gwyndor are betrothed and in love with each other, and then she turns away from him and falls in love with the hot mortal who comes. That's deviant from an elf.
It feels very
standpoint.
Weird for an elf, sure.
I mean, that is
deviant's a good word for how
deviant.
That fits
With
it's elf culture.
Seriously, that has to be. I mean, it's kind of low key, but it has to be. I mean, if you really, given what Tolkien develops about elves, that's in the top 5 most.
Right. It's not Maegwyn Idril.
No, Maegwyn's number 1. Right.
It's not even Celegorm Luthien.
It's not even Celegorm Luthien. It's not even Finwë and his wives, right? But other than those,
but it's next.
She's next. She's next.
Yeah. Like the Dear Johnning of Gwyndor is a very human thing.
Exactly.
That happen.
It's
not
for an elf to do
thing
that is just fifth.
So
worst
we need
relationship blunder in elvish history.
So we have to give her reasons for what she does, and that's what's happening
to provide it a sort of context. And so the way they've definitely broken up, and yet it's not even. I loved the moment when she almost turns and goes after him, but she's like, no, I won't. Right. So we see she's made a choice, and the choice that she's made is to it's over. It's
but it hurts.
But it hurts. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right, and he still
jerk.
calls her my love, so he obviously is still very into her. So it's
right, setting up the imbalance when he comes back.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not like there wasn't a reason they got engaged in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it's So from an elvish perspective, it's a pretty serious problem. But I anyways. As I say, I really like how that came out. Galadriel and Celeborn, I got a really great chance to say some things.
That was a really tough. Like, writing for Galadriel is so stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. Like, of all the characters in the story, she is the one I have the most trouble, like, actually getting into her head. Like, I can get into the heads of most of these characters.
Yeah.
I mean, not with no difficulty, but like, it's not that difficult. It's not. There's always something I can find where I can, like, just adjust a few levers in my brain and I can be that person, right? Galadriel,
it's hard.
I never feel like I am, like, I can't be her.
Right. Well, it's something that
fair.
Yeah. It's something I would want to think about more. Not now, but when we get to season 8, where I assume we're not going to wholly abandon Galadriel, though she may not be heavily involved. But when we do that thing that we always do in these seasons, where we're like, okay,
what is Galadriel up
right?
to? What is
Even the
Sauron
people
up to?
who we're not going to cover, like, what are they up to and what are they thinking? When we do that, I want to make sure that we're taking some good time to sit down with Galadriel and say, where is her head right now?
Yeah.
What are her motivations? And let's make sure that we are plotting her path clearly from season 3 through to season 8, and then a reasonable trajectory from there as to where we anticipate her going over the next few seasons. Especially since the end of this season is going to be a pretty big kick in the pants for her.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and it's nice to see Celeborn and Galadriel on the same page here and clearly, like, together, even though they're not together. But
yeah,
Celeborn is also pretty much done with Thingol at this point. Like, he tried.
Yes,
and he's like,
that was my favorite part. That was my favorite. Like, Celeborn's expression of, like, but yet Galadriel saying, and yet, like, I think your place is still with him. Like, don't give up on him, even though and also the way that we got through him, that implication that, like, I think he's listening to his wife, right? I love that.
Stuck that in there.
I love that. Yeah. That was good. I mean, because we don't have time to go into that and have a private discussion between Melian and Thingol to explain it all.
Yes.
But hinting at that there is an explanation, I thought that was nice.
Because we know Thingol on his own would be like, Galadriel, you're not allowed to come into Doriath because you were just hanging out with Feanorians. Would be a totally reasonable thing for him to do on his own.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, that was really good. And even I liked, again, it was very, it felt very elvish. The end with Galadriel and Celeborn. This whole, like, okay, so anyway, bye, honey. Like, your place is here and my place is over there. See you on the battlefield, though all the armies of Morgoth lie between us. Right? Like, but like the way in which they both so readily accepted that, like, the combination, which feels, from a human perspective, feels a little bit counterintuitive, right? We are partners working together, and yet we both fully accept that, like, we have these different tasks and trust that it's going to meet up again, and this is all going to, anyway, I like that you could imagine. I was trying to imagine, like, Morwen. I mean, of course, Hurin and Morwen are, in a sense, doing that. They both have 2 different callings, and they're both going to do their own things. But that's different. Like, I have to go with the army and you have to stay home is different from we're both going off and we're both going in 2 different directions.
We're both going to engage in the same battle, but we have
to not together, because it's fine. Right. It's
like the whole thing was weird, but it all, like,
elvishly weird. Yes.
But it felt like it made sense. To both of them, and so it makes sense to us.
Exactly. And I love that opportunity. Galadriel and Celeborn, having brought them together as we did back in season 4, one of the really fun things we get from Galadriel and Celeborn is the opportunity to show an elvish married couple in action, like how an elvish marriage rolls. And we've already done that at various points. Like, so I'm going to wander over this way. You'll be over there. Okay, fine. I'll probably see you again in a decade or whatever. That'll be fine. Like, we've already shown that element. Yeah, exactly. And now this just gives us sort of another example, right? Yeah. Instead of clinging to each other like Huor and Rian, right? They're just like, yeah, it's cool. Now, finally, we're late, but finally the big one, Anael and Elrond. That was unexpected. That was the one that surprised me. And that was really fun. The horrible cutting and then of course following that up with the Círdan stuff.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Really fun to be reminded of the effect of the the spell of bottomless dread. It's been a while since the spell of bottomless dread.
We've got another surprise on that front coming down the pike. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. No, that the elves still are wary of those whose wills have been dominated by Morgoth, and that we've already shown them be burned by this on a couple of very significant occasions, and then the sort of hints of more is happening that we haven't even seen and haven't even had reason to suspect. Anyway, that was an unexpected turn, but I really liked it because what I liked about it is it gave this very gentle sense of, defeating Morgoth is about more than just getting an army together and marching out into the plain, right? Like this whole Beleriand conflict with Morgoth situation goes much deeper than just the battlefield. And there was a kind of ominousness to that, which wasn't so strong that it undercut the the build up to the battle, which you're definitely feeling the momentum all moving in that direction here. But anyway, I thought that was really fun.
It's just fun in the sense that it's kind of heartbreaking to see Elrond and Anael's final conversation.
Yes.
Like that. I mean, it was pretty awful. But
it was awful.
In a way that worked very well.
Yeah. Needless to say, I'm always expressing great enthusiasm for the things that are horrible and sad. Not
I
because
keep saying horrible is my best move.
Right. Not because I love it, but because that's capturing what this story is supposed to be. It's you can't do the first, if you're not getting horrible and tragic, you're not getting the first stage right. Like it's,
Yeah, and we're not gonna feel the levels of betrayal that would be associated with this. Like the fact that a ship, some ships got burned. It doesn't, like, obviously Círdan's mad about that, but it doesn't really feel like that level of betrayal. But Elrond calling his dad names and him wanting nothing to do with him is like, okay, that's
a
the cutting
cost.
betrayal.
Yeah, personal tragedy.
So
you can feel
like we had to show both.
Yeah. No, that was great. And then very last comment, you totally got me. Like I was absolutely tearing up with the setup for Morwen not being conquered. Oh man, that was so awesome. That absolutely that knocked me out of my chair at the end of that. To have those be the last words between Hurin and Morwen. Second to last words between Hurin and Morwen.
Also the last words.
And also the last words. But yeah, oh man, that was that was it took us a bit to get to like what is the last thing that they need to
communicate to each other. And because it's the thing that he says when he finds her, like when she dies, like she was not conquered, like that's very, very moving, but it's also kind of cryptic. Like it's not entirely
Clear
obvious
what he meant. Yeah.
what he means there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always read that with like an underline with emphasis on the word she.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know why, but it always comes out to me as she was not conquered, not like she was not conquered.
Right.
And he's admitting that he kind of is.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I loved that scene. I thought that was it just exactly the right move to, especially the way in which that the whole question of being conquered, right? And how important that's going to be, not just because of the final words when Morwen dies, but Hurin and Morgoth, right? The way that it sets up and anticipates Hurin and Morgoth, and also, of course, Morwen's career, leading up to there.
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely.
And there's like a terrifying certitude that she has there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like her will is so clear.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. So that's that was great. That was a really wonderful springboard, both to what's going to be coming at the end of the season, but of course there, much more importantly, beyond. I thought that was phenomenal. So, all right. Well, it is super late. So we'll leave that there. I just wanted to say one other thing. Adol, I know you're still wanting to talk about the Finduilas issue more. Just the one thing I would say about that. So we have talked about that before. We haven't worked out everything about exactly what's going to come from that, because it's not this season. Like, we're going to come back to that. We will spend a good deal more time talking about exactly how the Finduilas and Turin situation arises when we get this. Will that be 8 or 9? That'll be 9, won't it?
We should get
Tail end of 8?
Turin to Nargothrond by the end of 8.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Where we cut that off, we can discuss.
I forgot.
No. He should. That whole thing should happen in season 8.
It's going to be
season ends with the fall of Nargothrond.
With the fall of Nargothrond.
I was like,
Finduilas is going to be dragged off in chains in episode 13, right? Yeah. So okay.
And that's and if Gwyndor, and when Gwyndor is like, Turin's like 10 times more impetuous than I ever was. And she's like, that was never the problem. You still aren't listening. I kept telling you that wasn't the problem.
That's right.
And you're still not listening. Yeah. And that's it, which is what I mean. Like
we've given ourselves stuff to work with.
Right.
Yeah, we try to work that season out. Yes. We have not yet.
We've planned the direction. We will work out the details, because that's really the other story.
Yep.
The point was here how in this season, how are we setting up for that as to because our desire in part is to kind of bail Finduilas. We don't want Finduilas to be going down as fickle and romantically deviant,
juvenile.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, her ability to communicate does come across as fairly juvenile.
Yeah.
She's bad at it, but
she is a little bit juvenile. I mean, she's young.
Right.
She's very young.
She's young, and difficulty communicating ruins lots of relationships.
Yes, exactly.
No matter how young you are.
Exactly, or how elvish.
Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so we will get there. We're not leaving that behind. I know that it's one of the several times, of course, needless to say, there have been a bunch of times during this whole season when we have come up upon, when these things have catapulted us into wanting to deal with swatches of the Turin story, and we have to just kind of restrain ourselves. So that's what we're doing. We'll come back to it. All right. But speaking of coming back to things, next time we are going to come back to casting. So again, don't forget, vote for who is going to play what roles, and we will discuss and make final decisions, look at the results of the voting and make final decisions, may choose to veto, who knows, or cast tiebreakers as we go through, but we will decide the casting and discuss them next time on Thursday, February 20th at 10 p.m. Eastern time. And then the next thing after that, we're going to be going back to the battle, right? Episodes 11 and 12 after that.
Yes.
Coming through into March. So cool. All right. Very good. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks, Nick and Marie, as always. And we will see everybody in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed.